This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. Today on the show, I'm joined by Oliver English. Oliver is the co-founder and CEO of Common Table Creative. And as a chef, filmmaker, and food advocate, Oliver has a unique view of storytelling. Oliver worked with his brother to produce the documentary film Feeding Tomorrow, which is currently streaming. In today's episode, Oliver shares his journey in making the film. He discusses the process of interviewing inspiring farmers. And Oliver also shares the story of how he transformed his front garden into a permaculture experiment. Let's get into it. Oliver, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
Great to have you here. So you're a filmmaker, a photographer, a chef, and a food advocate. Tell me a bit about how this journey came together. Where did it begin?
I joke that it began on the banquettes of my parents' first restaurant in Boston back in the day. They met at cooking school and they opened restaurants together. Their first one was called Olives, and my dad ran the kitchen, my mom ran the front of house. And so from the early days, I was in the restaurant, and we didn't have a nanny back then, so I literally grew up in the restaurants. And from when I was very young, I was washing dishes, bussing tables, eventually over the years, designing, developing, opening restaurants, working every position sort of in the restaurant business. Went to school, studied hospitality, then was opening restaurants around the world and started to realize firsthand how broken the food system was. I started to realize how much food we were shipping all the way around the world, how much food was being wasted. And it made me realize that I was pretty disconnected from food, ironically. And it inspired me to start meeting with farmers, to originally just to get food for the restaurants. But I was so blown away by some of the farmers that I met, their passion and their knowledge and their commitment to healthy food and soil and their connection to the environment, both the challenges they were facing related to food and the food system and the environment and health, but also the solutions that they understood and represented and could talk about. And my brother was a filmmaker at the time, and he said, let's start filming interviews with farmers. And one thing led to the next, and we started filming interviews with originally farmers, but then chefs, climate scientists, et cetera. And we were kind of looking around a couple years ago and saying, there's a lot of problems in the world related to food, from environmental destruction to health epidemics to climate change. What role does the food system play in all of those interconnected challenges? And also, what role can the food system play in helping to solve those challenges? And how do we tell stories about a more positive, hopeful, regenerative future with food at the center? And so that's how we started. And it's been 7 years since we started that journey. And we just came out with our first documentary called Feeding Tomorrow, which came out 6 weeks ago on Apple TV and Amazon Prime. And we also launched a production company called Common Table Creative, and we focus on storytelling around food and farming all around the world. We work with food companies, NGOs, nonprofits, and we visit farms all around the world to talk about where food comes from, how it grows, and how it impacts the world around us.
Congratulations on the project. It's amazing, and good to know that it's out in the world. I got a sneak peek a little while back before it kind of launched, and it was an amazing film, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Tell us a bit more about the project, and tell us a little bit more about what is this film, where did it come from?
Absolutely. It really was that first chance encounter with this farmer in the Bahamas. Like I said, I was just going to get food for the restaurant, but I ended up spending like 3 hours with this guy, Sakane, and he walked me around the farm, and he had this joy and love and passion for food and farming. He shared with me that the weather patterns that he grew up with were so different from the ones today that he didn't know what to plant. He couldn't predict what to plant, that he was one of the first people in his family to go plant-based and one of the only people to not develop a chronic disease because of all of the highly processed food and fast food infiltrating the Bahamas through the US. And also, we looked in the distance and we saw trash fires. And I was like, Sakane, what's going on there? And he said, there used to be 12,000 farms in the Bahamas. Now there are 1,200. everything is industrialized in the US, shipped in on styrofoam, wrapped in plastic, and there is so much trash that they send it to the landfill and they burn it. So here we were with this person who was both on the front lines of dealing with these challenges, but also had this incredibly optimistic outlook. And he was the first person to explain to me how deeply interconnected our food system is with every part of the world and every part of our lives, from human health to the environment to issues of national security and climate and healthy food access, really everything. And he said to me, quote, if we can feed people good quality food, I could change the way they look at food and in turn change the way they look at life. I thought in that moment, oh my gosh, more people need to meet farmers. I've been in this world my whole life and I've never met a farmer until I was 27 years old and I had to go seek it out. What if more people met farmers? Maybe this is how we can start to connect people back to food and farming and more broadly, our impact on the environment. So it was, to be very honest, it was a very beginner type hypothesis, but we really looked around at the entire world and looked at climate change, population growth, health epidemics, inequality, and said, what role can the food system play and fixing the food system play in creating a healthier, more sustainable world? And our vision from the beginning was, we want to focus on solutions. We want to tell a true, honest narrative about the situation we're in now, from a health perspective, environmentally, from a societal perspective. But we also want to focus on solutions. What do the farms of the future look like? How do we fix the healthcare industry? And how do we create healthy food for everybody? And most importantly, how do we get people to connect back to food and begin an inquiry where they ask questions about where the food comes from? They start to question the environmental impact of food, the health impact of food. And through the lens of the restaurant business originally, we started meeting with farmers and then chefs, and then we would get introduced to a nutritionist. Then we would meet a climate scientist. And then the guy who had beehives on top of the roof in New York for the restaurant that we had introduced us to this educator in Boston who they were teaching kids about repopulating the bee habitats. And we ended up meeting this amazing educator. And so it was really this organic journey of a combination of people introducing us to other people, reading books, listening to podcasts, exploring things on our own. And we ended up coming up with this incredibly inspiring cast of characters that together paint a profound tapestry of what the future of food looks like and share with us in a digestible, inspirational way how interconnected our food system is and positive, tangible examples of how to fix it from a systems perspective, but also inspire individuals to be part of a more healthy, sustainable world through the food they put on their plate, the farmers they support, the policies they support, and everything they do or don't do with their fork.
I love how you've talked about the storytelling approach, the connections, and food systems are about connections. But you've done that through showing those stories. And I think this is really amazing and really important for people to understand, starting with the farmer, but then opening up all of the other perspectives in that. What was something that surprised you in the process of making this film? Like, what's the thing that stood out to you?
I think the fact that we have all the solutions already. When we first got into this, I thought, oh, maybe it's this, technology that is far away in the future that's going to fix ag, or, we live in this world where technology is, paramount. And the reality is that it's not. We have the solutions already. And so many of the solutions in agriculture, healthcare, and sort of social justice are based on older ways of farming, regenerative ways of farming that many people around the world, indigenous communities, people around the world who are not in the Western world have been doing and still are doing in many ways forever. So in agriculture, for example, Mark Shepard is our main sort of agroforestry farmer. He takes 110 acres of conventional corn and soy land in the Midwest, transforms it into a blossoming agroforestry site using tried and true agroforestry regenerative practices that have, again, they're not something new. They've been in place for a long time, but they got sort of wiped out through the agro-industrial revolution, through the green revolution, which is not really the green revolution, but it's really taking lessons from the past and reapplying them to today. Similarly, in healthcare, the woman Lisa McDowell, the main nutritionist in our film, I don't want to give it away, but a little teaser here, she builds the first working farm on a hospital campus in the United States and is treating cancer patients with whole food plants from nutrient-dense soil. And the old verbiage, let thy food be thy medicine, we've all heard it and we've gone away from that. We've forgotten that truth. And it's been part of culture and people forever. And this is the story of simply looking at that truth and of saying, this is solving so many issues through this idea. Similarly, in education, the B.D. Brown, in a traditionally, what is considered a food desert, or some people say food apartheid these days, introduces learning gardens, nutrition classes, and scratch cooking with food from local farms. These kids are able to concentrate more, have better test outcomes, and have better educational outcomes. And they score higher from on a mental health perspective. And so, again, it's not rocket science. I thought it was going to be this like crazy future tech solution. It's not. It's putting whole food plants and farming back at the center of the conversation. And through that, a deeper connection to the environment, to the world, and to ourselves. And that is the beauty of feeding tomorrow, nourishing today to feed tomorrow.
So how did the film change the way that you approach the food that you actually eat?
Significantly, I would say. I have been on a very sort of holistic food journey, and my diet has resembled the arc of me working on the film pretty much. And so pretty much early days, I was in many ways eating, like many Americans, meat 3-4 times a day. It was just part of the diet. I never really thought about it, to be honest with you. Then I started working on the film. I started learning about all the challenges we face, started interviewing, climate scientists and all of these experts. And I pretty quickly went hard vegan because I was like, oh my God, this is all terrible. So then I did pretty much hard vegan for like 2-3 years. And then as we went to some more of these farms, I was like, okay, I'm being told by these farmers that it is important that some animals are incorporated into regenerative farming systems. You don't need to eat the animals. However, the healthiest farms do have animals integrated into them, so you don't have chemicals coming from the outside. They act as pest management, as fertilizers, etc. So I started to say, okay, if there is a little bit of meat or fish sometimes, if it comes from a source that is grass-fed or regenerative or part of a system, I'm more okay with that. So now I say plant forward. I'm not a full vegan, but it's more for me about asking questions about where the food comes from. And I also kind of apply like the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, I'm vigilant and I'm very on point with what I do. And it's a lot of rice and beans and vegetables. But 20% of the time, if I'm traveling, I'm a little bit looser with what I'm doing. I think everyone's body is different and everyone's got to find their own balance that works for them. And I think telling people like what to eat specifically is not a good way to do things. But I also do know that the way that the industrial meat model is existing in the United States is horribly destructive to the environment, to our health, and to animal welfare. That is unequivocally true. But on the other hand, we do need small amounts of animals in regenerative systems. So how do we take animals off concrete, out of concentrated animal feeding operations, and reintegrate them into holistic farm management systems through regenerative principles and regenerative agriculture? And again, you don't need to eat the animals, but we do need the animals from everything that we've seen in these systems. So I think of all of the diets that I've seen, and Lisa McDowell, the main nutritionist in our film, says this beautifully. He says, there's always different diets out there, but everyone agrees that getting more plants is better for you and better for the environment. So what we're trying to say in our film, and I think what I'm trying to say more broadly, is let's not talk as much about what you can have. Let's talk more about what you should have. And by putting more plants at the center of your plate, by putting more colors at the center of your plate, by putting more local nutrient-dense food at the center of your plate, you start to crowd out the other stuff. And you start to feel better as well. So I think the conversation needs to be less about what do I have less of, and more about how can I have a positive impact on the world through the food that I eat, through the farms that I support, and what I put on my plate.
What was it like working with your brother?
I am so grateful every day that I get to work with my brother. Simon is the cinematographer, editor, and co-director on the film. He's an incredibly gifted cinematographer and editor, and at only age 27, it's his first film. It's pretty remarkable. I'm like, honestly, I'm blown away by his level of skill and persistence for being such a young guy. And It's really amazing. And what's really nice, and people always ask us, like, how do you guys work together? Do you fight? Da da da. And it's like, no, we do completely different things. We are the front of house and the back of house of a restaurant. I'm the front of house. I do all the talking. And he's the back of house. He makes it delicious. And it's like we joke that like I can't do what he does, and he maybe could do what I do, but not in the same way. And so it's a very complementary skill set. And so it works. But we also share incredibly hard work ethic and a passion and a vision for what we do. And then we both kind of fill in parts that we're good at.
One of the things that, just pivoting slightly, I'm aware you've transformed your front garden. So tell me a little bit about that.
So throughout the course of making the film, there's a lot of people we interviewed who maybe didn't make it in the film because we cast a wide net. And honestly, in the early days, we didn't really know what we were doing. All that being said, we met so many amazing farmers, urban gardeners, and people along the way who we would just go visit with or meet with and film with. And they would give us little tips. I vividly remember one of these ladies who was like, oh, you know what? She's like, what are you guys doing with your compost? We were like, oh, we've got this like, little tumbler thing. And she goes, screw that. Dig a hole in your front yard and just put the compost in the hole. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, if your soil is not doing well, you can just dig a bunch of holes, put your compost in there, and over time it'll disintegrate and add nutrients to that soil. And I was like, it sounded crazy. But we literally started digging holes in our front yard. And then we started planting. And, we've got a 20 by 20-ish square foot piece of, grass in our front yard. And we would kick the soccer ball out there every once in a while, but we never really used it. And eventually we started just taking up the grass, and we would plant, some kale. We would plant some Swiss chard. We'd plant some trees. We'd plant some pollinator flowers. We'd add some more compost, some more wood chips. And eventually we ripped up all the grass and turned it into, it was originally like a garden. Now it's more of a permaculture experiment. You got to come see it when you're in LA. It is incredible. I become like a bird watcher now. I love watching the hummingbirds. I never thought that would be the case. But we've got leafy greens, we've got tomatoes, we've got a bunch of herbs, we've got a bunch of trees right now. The bananas are starting to come in, and also a bunch of native pollinator flowers that attract hummingbirds, butterflies, bees. We also have artichokes. It's amazing. It is one of my favorite places in the world to sit out in our little garden. It's like 10 to 15 degrees cooler than on the street, just 5 feet away, which is incredible. As we know, as soon as you start to harvest a fruit or vegetable, it starts to dissipate in nutrients. So anything that you can have in your yard is the most nutrient dense for you. But I would also say that my favorite part, and I think the most unexpected part of the front yard journey, has been the way that it has transformed our relationship with our community. Before we had that front yard, maybe we would talk to, the cute girls in the street or like a couple of young people in the street. But as soon as we started to grow that garden, we started talking to everybody. People from all backgrounds and ages, and everyone would come by and say, oh, my mom used to have a garden, or back in the country that I came from, we always used to grow food. What are you guys growing? People would stop and sit and talk. It totally transformed our relationship with our community because it presented this common element, this thing for people to talk about. And people would stop with their dogs and their kids and pick flowers. And I think, to me, that is so beautiful, because we are living in, I think, an increasingly isolated world for so many reasons. And growing that garden had the dual impact of three levels of impact. One is health, in terms of just healthy food right there. Mental health, sitting out in the garden. Two is the environmental benefit of, quite literally, birds, butterflies, bees. It's cooler. Now we get these torrential downpours in Los Angeles, and water's rushing off our neighbors' yards into the sewer, but ours is coming down and drenching. The avocado tree that sits above the garden used to never produce avocados, and now it's producing avocados because we've increased the soil organic matter by a significant amount. And then the third part, again, is the connection with the community. And so as we have grown the microbial community underneath the soil, it has enhanced the community above the soil, which is kind of a beautiful realization.
I love that connection, and I love how, as you are learning and telling stories from around the world, you're also practicing in your front garden. And every one of us can do that in our gardens or in our spaces where we are. I know you were talking a bit about community, and I know you have lots of interesting people join you around the table. Who's one person you'd love to cook for?
It would make me really nervous, but I'd love to cook for Alice Waters. Again, that would make me really nervous because she's like the goat of all of this, but she's also someone who has been such a source of inspiration for the farm to table movement, for the school garden movement. We also built a regenerative school farm in Santa Monica, and the edible schoolyard was a big part of that inspiration. I meet people on a daily basis, and I say, why did you get into the world of food? This woman who runs the Regenerative Organic Alliance, last night I was talking to at this event, and she said, I met Alice Waters, or I heard Alice Waters speak 15, 20 years ago, or someone said, I watched this thing on Alice Waters 20 years ago, and I got inspired to be part of this. And I think that is so remarkable that someone, through their passion and dedication and unrelenting vision for a better future, can spark not just joy and curiosity and passion, but also inspire people to leave what they're doing and to go dedicate their lives to this movement. And I would like to honor her by cooking her a meal. Again, it would make me pretty nervous, to be honest with you. But I would just love to have a conversation with her about how we can continue to move that forward, because I feel like so many of us in the food movement we're not the first ones to do this. We are building on the amazing work of those the pioneers who have come before us. And the movement is building and growing and growing. It's really exciting to see. But I would love to see how things have changed since she started, and also to get her opinion on what else we can do to spread the movement and move it forward. So again, I'd be really nervous, but that's what I'd cook for.
We've talked a lot about food. What's something that you are loving to eat and that you're enjoying immensely at the moment?
I've been making these like big yogurt smoothie berry bowls that I really like, that have been feeling really good. I've been starting to work out a little bit more, which feels good. But I've been loving like berry season in Los Angeles, and we're very, very lucky to have that. I also learned recently that perennial berries and perennial plants in general, because they have such deep root systems, they're able to access a whole different level of nutrients that annual plants cannot. So I'm very excited about that. So I've just been sometimes I do plant-based yogurt. Sometimes I do regenerative yogurt. There's a brand of regenerative yogurt that I like. I kind of go back and forth a little bit, because dairy, sometimes it's great. Sometimes I'm not crazy about it. But I found some great plant-based yogurt as well. But I've been doing a bunch of different perennials, like 5 different ones: blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, dates, and walnuts, and peanut butter or almond butter, and local honey. And to me, that is just like an excellent way to start the day. And it's also 5 perennial plants, which is pretty cool, and local honey as well. And it can be fully vegan, or I guess the honey, you don't have to have it with honey, but I like a little bit of honey. That's what I've been liking on the breakfast side of things. And also from a meal prep perspective, what I found is that I used to like make like a full meal and have that for like 4 days. After day 2, you're like, all right, I'm absolutely over this. I can't do this. And so then I dialed it back, and I realized that now I'll do a foundation meal prep, whether it's like a quinoa or rice and beans or a lentils kind of thing. My mom always made lentils growing up, so I love lentils. I'll make a big batch of that in the beginning of the week, and then I'll either add maybe like a piece of salmon or some other veggies or something. But I found that I really enjoy having that in the fridge, and it's like the easiest way for me to stay healthy and sustainable throughout the week. And it reduces the amount of times that I would like order in, or after a long week, sometimes I'm like not always feeling like cooking. But that's a way to keep things healthy and fresh for me. I know that's not the most like exciting chef thing, but it's just like the simple things. If I'm like cooking for myself, that's where I'm at. So
it's what you're enjoying. And sometimes the simple things with the nutrients and the diversity is just what we need. So thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate it. Anytime.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.